Hi everybody, I am back. So this is Laura from Healing with Spirit. It is Friday, October 30th, 2020, and today we're going to go through a lot of energy update. I even had to write notes and make a list. We're going to go through the numerology updates, the Mercury retrograde, the Mars retrograde, tomorrow's full moon, this whole thing around Hallows Eve and Halloween, and all this crazy space weather stuff and how it all affects us, what to do, what's coming up that can help you, all these things. So I am just hoping right now that I can get, since communication is a challenge, that the communication that I can convey this in a very simple way for you. So welcome. So the first part is, let's just start off, good morning Jane, with the numerology. I know I went through this in the Facebook Live today, but I'm going to do it again. It's an 8 number in numerology. It's been one of the repeating numbers we have been seeing over and over and over again. So when we think about the 8 number, we think of the infinity. It's also a reminder that the universe is acknowledging that we are actually going through some very challenging times and that we are supported. So it is also the number that casts a lot of energy, which is why we look at numbers when we do this work. It impacts the internal and the external, us on an internal and external level. And it can also relate to areas of compatibility. So the 8 for the new day for today is repeating since we've been doing these Facebook Lives since March. And it centers around the areas of hard work, success, and especially karmic balance, okay? So now how does that relate to with the energies of 2020? Well, we're going to go into that shortly, but you want to think of it as a work year. All right, and I can post links if you would like to see links in the comments below to the blogs that go into all the numerology around 4. I know there's so many different interpretations of what that looks like, but what Spirit kept telling me around the area of numerology with 4 was that this was going to be a work year. And it took me a while to do these energy forecasts, which then morphed over a period of weeks, because obviously look at what happened. There's a lot of disruption that's happening in 2020. All right. And, the Facebook Lives that we have been doing since March, 3 times a week, have been offering added support and guidance and flow with these energies. So for those of you who have been around since then, might be seeing some patterns of some of the things that I'm going to go over, okay, that we have been using and talking about in these Facebook Lives. So let's just start with some of the space weather, just to kind of recap what's been happening, which kind of sparked why I'm doing this energy update. So back on October 15th, I put out an alert on Facebook and Instagram about a cosmic ray health alert that was issued. Now, I don't issue those alerts, so this comes from the space weather communities, and those alerts happen after there's been what they call almost like a very zero interaction between the sun and the earth that lasts over 3 days, and which then opens up the portal in the atmosphere to other astro events coming from outside of our galaxy. So those that are most at risk that were affected by that were people with cardiac issues, autoimmune, mental health, or even past trauma. And I believe I even went into some stories regarding some clients of mine and family members that both with cardiac and autoimmune that had complete flare-ups. One of them was borderline life-threatening as a result of some of these things. So one of the things that I wrote when I wrote that was that this was not a good time to be picking a fight with anybody. I'm not sure if anybody remembers that or not. And these energies that with this cosmic ray alert, health alert, were also amplified when you add in like the Mercury retrograde, the Mars retrograde, the communications that are off as well as the emotions and triggers like anger and stress that also got amplified. By a few days later, 4, 5, 6 days, actually 6 days later, on October 21st, we started experiencing subsequent space weather activity that triggered a lot of geomagnetic activity. I even posted a picture on Facebook that were some very vibrant northern lights that we haven't seen in a while in Norway. And these energies, by the way, if you don't understand them or what they are or how they affect you or any of those things, you don't have to be necessarily an empath, but if you have chronic illness, the class, even though I have it labeled as an empath, might still benefit you. So I have this class coming up in January. It's a virtual class called the Rooted and Resilient Empath. And there's at least 2 units in there that go specifically into these particular things, like the space weather and the Earth's electrical grids and EMFs and things like that. And there's other units on how to deal with them energetically. So yes, we target empaths, but you don't necessarily have to be an empath. If you are sensitive, then you might be able to find tools that can help you. So that is, you want to make sure that you're on our email list to make sure you get the updates when that gets launched. On Friday, October 23rd, I issued another space weather alert, which talked about these geomagnetic storms on the Earth, which are in the ionosphere of the Earth that triggers these storms, which gives us the northern lights, and how that got amplified again. And then on Monday, the 26th of October, I issued another one. And here's where I actually talked about that, this past week, we were halfway through Mercury retrograde. This is the planet of communication. And it goes, guess what? It goes direct on November 3rd on election day. So expect disruptions, all right? Those that have been taking any using digital communications, whether working from home or online classes, have mostly been seeing like those affected, those digital communications. And one of the things I said was, instead of reacting to all this and what is wrong, or even trying to put out the fires, to focus on doing, I call the RE words, the retreat, the rethink, relax, rejuvenate, reevaluate things. Like take a pause and focus on those words. And I also talked about the influence of the whole fiery Mars retrograde, which is, by the way, in Aries. That goes direct on November 13th. So that also adds another layer. So when we're talking about this space weather events, these other layers also can amplify what's already there, right? So it's like you add one medication, then another medication, before you know, you get this big amplification, right? So we talk about this in the addictions class, like if you mix one alcohol with one drug, if you just stack the effects on each other, you might be fine, but taking them together, it's like an explosion, right, of a side effect, all right? So it's that chemistry. So the Mars adds this other fiery layer. So it adds this fire to what is already volatile. And Mars is considered the planet of war. So the desires and conflicts that we have been seeing in the past couple of weeks that have been growing are up. Stress is up. Life-changing drama. I know I've had my share this week with my mother who's got dementia. I know I've been talking about this. And unfortunately, her health has been declining and dealing with all this interstate. So this is the stuff that can get up and triggered, right? So you may have been feeling this around the areas of your family or the home environment or your career or even in the political realms. And if you have been feeling this, or you feel like you can't get your footing, or you feel very stagnant, then Mars might be part of this aspect, okay? That might be part of the issue. So we add then now the numerology component, the 4-year. Again, this is a work year. So this is where we take these aspects and what is triggering us, and we go right into what is the soul saying? What are we supposed to be doing in this work year, right? We all are this separate piece to the larger puzzle of this earth and this universe, okay? So this whole space weather component, the coronal hole that I mentioned on Monday, we had this coronal hole stream that intensified beginning on the 23rd, that continued all the way through the 26th. So 4 days of this intermittent spurts of these solar windstorms that trigger geomagnetic activity on the Earth. That I go green light, yellow light, red light. Okay, that's just how I identify. It was in the yellow light range. Okay, but those of us that are sensitive still might feel it really intently. And the intensity kind of engulfed not just one area of the planet, pretty much the whole planet. So Monday on the Facebook Live, I did talk about this very briefly. Some mentioned that they had headaches over the weekend. I mentioned that, like, especially Saturday, I felt this like great freeze. We talk about trauma triggers like fight, flight, freeze. And I felt this whole like pause, this whole freeze kind of state. But I also had like increase in my ringing in my ears, my joints, everything just hurt, and fatigue, and as well as very bizarre sleep patterns, okay, and dream states. And then Tuesday was like boom, like another like rubber band snap, okay. And some of you may have even seen the video regarding on my Facebook page regarding the Blue Jay incident. And now that I know what happened after this geomagnetic activity, because Tuesday we went into C-class solar flares, okay, different space weather, but affects us differently, okay? And so which can affect things like GPS. And if that hits the earth plane, like we go into the empath class where we talk about, ooh, did you guys see that? We have spirit here. So wondering if like the GPS, so like the whole Blue Jay that flew in that held in my hand and I was able to give it Reiki and release it in the videos, and now I second guess, well, is it a sign or was it that the GPS was off within the Blue Jay? Or is it a combination of both, right? So you can check out my Facebook page, The Healing with Spirit, on Facebook and Instagram if you want to see that video where I show that. And I also go into the symbolism of Blue Jay, what that all means. And on the 28th, which was 2 days ago, I posted another update, all right, where I then go, well, geez, guys, we have some C-class solar flares, and it's been intermittent even through today, okay? The only thing that shifted on top of that was on the 28th, we had a sharp increase. And I want to go more in the mid-range comparatively. What's been happening with the Schumann's resonance, which is the Earth's electrical grids. And it was in the 40s range, but it lasted for hours, and it was more in the night. Like if you're in the United States, it was more in the nighttime, so it would have affected you. For me, I go, that's like giving me a shot of adrenaline or a shot of like caffeine. So I couldn't go to sleep until like 4 o'clock in the morning. And so, but for others, you might have felt like off, or you may have felt like computer issues. So like things like technology. So like when you look at the past couple weeks, some things to think about with technology, and depending on what affects what. The computers, for instance, like my computer on Wednesday, brand new computer. I have a brand new computer that I got from my school, and it wouldn't even reboot. I couldn't turn it off. I could not reboot it. I could not shut it down, nothing, until there was an actual shift in the energy that all of a sudden it just did it on its own. Did this for hours, all right? Like GPSs, whether it's your own internal GPS, I've been even hearing this week animals have been heightened with anxiety and heightened emotionally or very high stress, especially I want to go Tuesday, which was the 27th, into Thursday. So right where the peak of that C flare activity was happening. So whether it's like devices like cell phones, or whether it is a GPS in your car, or whether it's our own internal GPS systems, these may be infected. So cell phones, Facebook, internet, like I noticed things, there was a lot of wacky things that were happening. And then you just add this whole Mercury retrograde, Mars retrograde that just amplified these things this week. So here's the rule of thumb with space weather, okay? If there's a solar eruption that is actually going to take out, because this whole thing with the sun flaring back up with this new solar cycle that's happening, that's one of the reasons why we're having some of these events. that it can take out these power grids, okay? Well, before it can take out the power grid, the first thing that's going to go first are the satellites, all right? Which is why we're seeing some of this activity happen this week, okay? Now let's go into the full moon. A lot of energy, right? You guys ready for this? So here's the full moon. So before I go into the full moon, I want to talk to you about this being Hallows Eve and this full moon that is happening on Halloween, okay? Or in the Celtic tradition, Samhain, and it's not Samhain or whatever. It's pronounced Samhain. My Irish partner corrected me on that because I was pronouncing it wrong. So this whole idea of Halloween and the concept of Halloween actually is a very Celtic tradition. Now the Celts go back, were a culture that go back over 2,000 years old, that if you were to go into the land areas like what would have been in, like what's today is Ireland, the UK, and France. And I guess in some areas, you know, with history, I have to look more into that, might be some of the Druidy parts as well. So this is an area that marked the end, this is the holiday that marked the end of summer and the harvest, right? We have this whole idea of harvest, and as well as the beginning of the dark, cold winter. It was seen as a time that was associated with human death. So the Celts believe that the night before this new year, so November 1st, was actually considered the new year, okay? And so the 31st was deemed as the boundary between worlds of the living and the dead. Like that boundary can get blurred. So on the night of the 31st, it was celebrated as Samhain, when it believed that the ghosts of the dead returned to the earth, okay? So now you get the idea of where costumes and ghosts and goblins kind of came out, right? So in addition to causing trouble on like damaging crops and things like that, the Celts thought that the presence of the otherworldly spirits made it easier for the Druids, as well as Celtic priests, to make predictions about the future. So this is where the thinning of the veils happened. So for people purely dependent on the volatility of the natural world, these prophecies were a very important source of comfort during these long, dark winter months. So to commemorate this, they used to do bonfires where people would burn crops and animals were actually sacrificed to the Celtic deities. And during this celebration, they would wear costumes and all these other aspects, okay? So this was, when you blend in, then the whole idea of All Saints Day, this is where the Catholics and the Christians kind of copped it on with these other aspects. And when we add it to America, this is where we now have like the Salem witch trials, okay? Because it was so Puritan and we were colonized. We've colonized a lot of these ancient traditions in this country. So when we now look at the full moon in this, it's going to be happening tomorrow, which a lot of astrology are labeling it as the rebellion blue moon. So it's the second full moon of the month, and it's deemed as the Halloween full moon. So it's close to Uranus, the planet of change and revolution. So personally, what I have been feeling this week was, I was kind of glad that so-called traditional Halloween was canceled. I'm not sure about you, because I have been feeling the need to kind of I want to go hunker in to work with spirit, with that strong focus around ritual and ceremony, not in groups, not in masses, but really get quiet and hunker into spirit mode, okay? But for those that aren't like me, I guess, some of you might be feeling like increased anxiety, increased stress, increased uncertainty. So this is going to be, excuse my language, a fucking doozy, okay? So this is where the impulsive and unpredictable and the volatile, we go with all the things that we've been talking about between Mars and Mercury and space weather, and now we add the full moon mix into it all. Like, holy fucking shit, hold on to your bootstraps, okay? So this is where I use the analogy, like, you want to think of like ADHD on steroids, okay? Like, maybe with a mix of cocaine, all right? So it's like seriously like amped up. And so a lot of astrology experts have been warning, because of the U.S. election, the risks of increased frustration, the increased risks for like disagreements, civil unrest, violence, and rebellion. So now that we kind of like got that shit out of the way, right, and we got that on the table, so what does it all mean? What does it all mean? So the full moon, what I'm seeing is an opportunity. So this is where, like we say, you know, we look at numbers and everybody goes like, oh my God, all they want to do is focus on like, oh my God, like this is happy, Mercury retrograde, like I hate Mercury retrograde. Then you're missing the opportunity of what's presented. If you're focusing on the lack, and you're focusing on the frustrations, and you're focusing on all the so-called, what humans like to do is negative versus change, right? So the full moon, here's the opportunities around the full moon. Yes, emotions and instincts are at its peak. So just like what I talked about in the Facebook Live this morning, this is where you can also access your full power, okay? So you can use this to work the shit out without lashing out or blaming the external environment, okay, the external influences. This is a time to get centered, to get clear. This heightened awareness can also allow the impartial and the balanced things to get looked at. So for the next 2 weeks, you're going to want to be extra cautious. You're going to want to be extra aware due to this so-called disruptive nature. So like if you read tarot, that's like the Tower card in tarot. That's like you're building this foundation, but this can bring in the disruption piece, okay? So at the same time, this is a positive omen. If you've been really working hard and you have been consistently focused on what you've been doing for soul this year, you might start seeing breakthroughs, okay? This is an opportunity to get creative, to be adaptable, to be flexible, to get into the flow. Don't label, don't judge, okay? This is the karmic balancing that I talked about in this morning's Facebook Live, okay? So if you missed that, I would say go watch that, because we talked about some of this aspect. Now, when we add the Mercury retrograde back into this, remember those RE words that I mentioned earlier in this video, okay? I mentioned all those REs, like the relax, reevaluate, right? So stop trying to prevent this fire. So we see that we might have some civil unrest. Don't feed the fire. Don't put gasoline on it. And don't even try to prevent it, because it's already here, okay? So it's already started. So you're going to expect things like delays and communication issues, etc. So the universe doesn't see this as like, this is already done. It's whether or not you're adding fuel to that fire, or you're looking at your lessons and how you can be the antidote, right? How you can be the rain, how all these other aspects. So it's important to do these following things. It's important to listen carefully. It's important to pause. Those classes that I'm going to be launching, probably, I'm hearing when I was putting these notes together, I was trying to figure out the dates, and I'm hearing this, so, and I heard it's got to be after November 13th, because when Mars goes direct, okay? So now you got those dates, but the three powers, the power of the word, the power of the pause, the power of processing. What I'm going to go into next is going to give you a why you need to take those classes. So it's important to pause. It's important to pay attention to the details and to think twice before making any kind of important decisions, and to seek professional assistance, whether psychotherapy, medical, spiritual, healing, all those other aspects, trauma. So even though it's going direct on November 3rd, the effects can last 2 weeks after that. So words can easily become mean. Hence, we've got to learn the power of the word. So if we want positive change, how can we use it for positive change? That's what these classes are going to be about, okay? The three classes, the power of the word, the power of the pause, and the power of processing. And it's going to include experientials and worksheets. Each one's probably, I originally was banking it for an hour, but I'm feeling it's going to be an hour and a half long virtually. So with the power of the word, it's going to help you with how to be more aware, how words are energy and words are spiritual power. And so when you add the Mars retrograde, right, you want to think of these repeating themes, right? More important of what's more important than what went wrong is to remember how you conquered these challenges, okay? And remember that with the Mars retrograde, that this is a work year in numerology. So this is where we got to do our work, all right? And to surrender to that soul piece, which is what we've been talking about, that karmic balancing, right? Working with soul and ego, the yin and the yang, right? The balance between all this, the karmic debt, and to embrace the uncertainty, to acknowledge the emotions, to that whole idea of inner truth, that truth theme has been playing out this month, right? So here are the 5 tips to help you now, that this is like what you need to hear now. 1, be more aware. Like, how are you feeling? Because things are going to escalate. How are you feeling? How are you getting into the body? How are you paying attention to your own language? How are you reacting? Be more aware. Pay attention to that internal environment and processing. Pay attention to that internal environment, and processing hasn't been more important than now, right now. So those 3 classes, the power of the word, the power of the prose, and the power of processing, are going to be crucial with this and helping you build that awareness. The second one is pay attention to the space weather if you think, or you're not sure if you're getting impacted by it. Just start keeping a diary. I just put like these little asterisks in my calendar. You know, if I'm feeling it, if I see patterns, then I know I'm connected. So the class is going to be launching, where I go into incorporating this into the Rooted and Resilient Empath, is going to be launching on January 2021. So this is where you're going to pay attention to these subtle cues. The space weather is going to give you the subtle clues to help us along the way, because it's going to amplify things. It's going to show us what needs to be shifted. And so with the sun entering into this new solar phase, the chances are it's going to intensify and amplify. Okay? I know that's not necessarily what you want to hear, but if you get these skill sets, we're evolving. So it's going to we're going to get better at how we handle these issues, right? The third tip is to understand that this is less about what happens and more about how we are responding and showing up, right? So like the whole thing about being more aware and being even more aware with the space weather, you know, and how that impacts you and your health, that's going to be very important. The 4th tip is mastering the calm within the storm. And you've been hearing me saying these analogies, but the analogy, I'm going to shift the analogy, is staying in the center or the eye of the storm, to stay within. We're already in the storm right now, okay? So it's about not staying firmly and watch the storm go over us. It's about going along with the storm and staying in the calm or the eye of the storm. So we can't control what storms come at us or what storms arise, but we can control how we flow or how we navigate, right? Like a captain of a ship. So when the storm moves, we move. We stay in the eye of the storm like the hurricane, right? So when a hurricane hits land, what happens? It eventually dissipates. This is key. So it's not bypassing the storms, meaning the storms being internal and external, because both are happening at the same time, because we've got the karmic shit that's happening, past life shit's happening, generational shit's happening. We got all these different veils. Again, Halloween, the thinning of these veils on so many. This is the web of life that's coming at us in all these different directions, right? And we may not know, like, oh my God, which one's coming at us, right? So this is why staying in the center of the storm while you're working on it is crucial, because you're not ignoring the storm. You're not bypassing it. You're just staying in the calm, and you're observing, and you're watching and how to shift and how to navigate, okay? Because otherwise we're just bypassing it, and we're going to be hit harder next year if you bypass this stuff. Tip number 5 is to master the flow. Become more fluid. Pull out those paddles. Don't try to redirect a raging river or a rapid, because guess what? We can't. Don't try to stop and put a storm wall to stop the oceans from coming in and tearing down your house. This is about pulling out the surfboard and learning how to surf those waves, or pulling out the paddles and how we surf the rapids to avoid rocks, right? all these different things from crashing. This is about how do we become more self-aware? How do we adjust when necessary? To be kind and compassionate. Don't lash out, okay? To be like water and to be more fluid. This is what the energies are all showing us. The climax tomorrow with the full moon is putting all of these aspects between the space weather and the astrology and the cosmic and everything, the whole shit show. It's all coming to a head. So, which is why I felt the need to do this video, to kind of give you a glimpse of what's been happening, how to move forward, and what to pay attention to. The classes are specifically structured that I'm going to be doing in the next couple weeks. Are structured to help you navigate between now and the end of the year. And where it's going to be combined with the Bless Your Junk, which is another layer to manage those triggers, and the Rooted Resilient Empath in January. So I'm hoping this brings you some ideas and what to do and how to navigate, because I don't want to just say, oh, this is what's happening, without leaving you with the ideas of how to move forward, or what are the tools and directions that you need to help you move forward, okay, with that. All right, so I'm hoping this resonates with you, and just be gentle with yourself. Sit in ceremony, get out of your head, get into the body, and let's get this work done, because we all can collectively shift the storm from a hurricane to being dissipated into calm waters. Okay? So you ready to do this? Yeah? So let me know, put in the feedback in the comments, and let me know what resonated with you and what didn't. And if you're watching on replay, let me know as well. All right? Have a great day, everybody. Make sure you're on the email list so you get the updates on this as well. Have a great day. Arigato gozaimashita.